physical infrastructure. That is enormously important. But I will tell you what is even more important, and that is to address the human infrastructure, the needs of the working class of this country, the middle class of this country, the low-income people of our country, whether they are black or white or Latino, Native American, Asian American, needs that have been neglected for decades. It is no secret to the American people that for a very long time, the United States Congress has paid keen attention to the needs of the people on top. And yet we have turned our backs on millions of people who are struggling to put food on the table, to take care of their kids, to take care of their parents. And on top of that, obviously, we have ignored the great existential crisis of our time, and that is climate change. And the result of all of that is that today the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is wider than it has been in 100 years. Today you have two people who own more wealth than the bottom 40%. And for many of our billionaire friends, apparently they are increasingly unconcerned about what happens here on Earth because they're often out of space. But some of us who go home every weekend to our states and our districts, we kind of are worried about what's going on down on Earth and the needs of working families. So, Mr. President, as you know, as soon as we address this bipartisan physical infrastructure bill, we are going to move toward what I consider to be one of the most consequential pieces of legislation for working families since FDR, the New Deal, and the Great Depression. And we are going there and addressing the needs of working families because we understand that real wages for workers have not gone up in 50 years, an explosion of technology, explosion of worker productivity, and yet in real inflation accounted for dollars, many workers today are not making a nickel more than they did 50 years ago. We're going forward on the reconciliation bill to address the needs of the working class because in the richest country in the history of the world, it is unacceptable that half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. They go to work, and at the end of the week, they got nothing in the bank, and maybe they're even further behind because they can't afford their health care needs, the rent, and the educational costs of their children. We are going to go forward and pass this legislation because the time is long overdue for the United States Congress to begin to make sure the American people understand that our job is not just to represent the corporate elites and wealthy campaign contributors, but to address the needs of the struggling men and women of our country. And on top of all of that, it would be incomprehensible to the people of our country who turn on the TV, they see the West Coast burning, they see the drought in the Midwest, they see the floods all over Europe, Australia on fire. It would be incomprehensible and a real crime against future generations if we did not finally address in a significant way the existential threat not only to our country but to the world in terms of climate. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that the Budget Committee has done and what is going to be in that reconciliation package, because my friends here in the media are very concerned about process, which is fine, but the American people want to know, hey, what is the Congress going to do for me? What it's going to do to improve my life, my children's life, my parents' life? What are we going to do to save the planet? For a start, we understand that it is absolutely imperative to end the obscenity of some of the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations in a given year not paying a nickel in federal income taxes. So what we have seen in the pandemic, what we have seen in recent years, very, very wealthiest people becoming phenomenally richer. And then there are studies that are coming out that show that in a given year, some of the very wealthiest people in this country, multi-billionaires, are not paying a nickel in federal income tax. And at a time when corporate profits are soaring, we are seeing many major corporations making billions a year also not paying a nickel in federal income tax. And we are also seeing the pharmaceutical industry, which is enormously profitable, which charges our people the highest prices in the world for the prescription drugs we desperately need. We are seeing a situation where they can charge us anything they want because of the power of their lobbyists and their campaign contributions. And we're going to put an end to that as well, because we are going to demand that Medicare start negotiating prescription drug costs with the pharmaceutical industry. So my Republican colleagues say, well, they're going to be raising taxes. Yeah, we are going to be raising taxes on billionaires and on large profitable corporations, and we're going to demand that the pharmaceutical industry stop ripping us off. But we are adhering to President Biden's belief, which I share, that nobody earning less than $400,000 a year should pay a nickel more in taxes. So we're going to do exactly what the American people want us to do and tell the billionaire class that they're going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. Now, what else are we going to do? And what are we going to use that money for? We're going to use that money to start protecting the needs of our children, working families, the elderly. I think many Americans now see what public policy can mean in their lives because we are providing a $300 a month check per child. The United States has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. That is a disgrace, that it should be unacceptable to every member of the Senate. Well, we're going to end that. And I'm very proud to say, Mr. President, as I know you know, that as a result of the one-year child tax credit extension, $300 per child, we have reduced childhood poverty in America by 61%. Parents all over, in Vermont, California, now have the ability to start taking care of their children. And our job in reconciliation is either to make that $300 a month permanent, which I'd like to see, or at the very least, extend it for a number of years. Furthermore, in the United States of America, every person in this chamber should be disgusted by the dysfunctionality of our child care system. This is not 1950. Mom is going out to work, dad is going out to work, and they demand quality, affordable child care, which does not exist today. So what we say and what our goal is that no working family in this country should be paying more than 7% of their income for child care. And on top of that, we're going to make pre-K education for 3- and 4-year-olds free. Yes, that's right, free. We're going to do what other industrialized countries do and understand that the most important investment we can make is in the little children. And by the way, when we do that, we're going to allow well over 1 million women to go back to work because they no longer have to stay home because of lack of affordable child care. Mr. President, it is a bit embarrassing that our great country is the only major country on earth not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. Imagine that. Every other country in the world, virtually, does that. And in America, I have met with women, low-income women, give birth, then they got to go back to work in a week or two because they don't have the money to stay home. But we're going to end that. And we are going to have, as a nation, guaranteed paid family and medical leave. We are going to address the reality that many of our younger people are unable to obtain the good-paying jobs that are out there because they lack the higher education. Now, I myself will go further than this bill is going to go. I think time is long overdue to make public colleges and universities tuition-free and cancel all student debt. That's not what is in this bill. But what is in this bill says that at the very least, every American will have the right to get 2 years of community college. And they can use that to get the training they need to get the good jobs. Maybe it's nursing, maybe it's something else. But they will also get the credits they need that they can transfer into a 4-year school. So we're making a big step forward in getting young people the ability to get the training they need, the education they need to obtain the good-paying jobs that are out there. Mr. President, I know that you are aware that right here in this community, right here on Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C., you got people sleeping out on the street. And they're sleeping out on the streets in every state in this country. In fact, we have almost 600,000 people sleeping out on the streets of the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Well, this legislation will create millions of jobs in housing and in other areas, because we are going to build the low-income and affordable housing that we need. And it's not only homelessness. You got 18 million households spending 50% of their limited incomes on housing. We need to build low-income and affordable housing, and when we do that, we're going to create a heck of a lot of good-paying jobs. Just today, I talked to a gentleman whose wife is very, very ill and is having a hard time affording the home health care that he is paying for. We are an aging society, and whether people have severe disabilities or whether they're just getting old, people would rather stay at home in many cases rather than be forced into nursing homes. And what our legislation will do is significantly improve home health care in this country and make sure that those people who provide that important service, difficult service, are adequately compensated. Mr. President, I know that many of my Republican colleagues don't believe that climate change is real, don't believe that we should do anything about it, but they are dead wrong. And we cannot go home and look our children and grandchildren in the eye, knowing what we know, knowing that in many ways the climate crisis turns out to be worse than what scientists predicted it would be. Climate ordinarily changes over thousands of years, hundreds of years. We are seeing the change in climate with our own eyes year by year. It is frightening. And if people think that the forest fires in Oregon, California, Montana, elsewhere are an aberration, they're a once in a lifetime, you're wrong. Everything being equal, we will see worse in years to come. And the truth is, what makes this crisis so difficult, we can't solve it alone. We're going to have to work with China and India and Europe. We're going to have to bring the world together to save this planet for our kids and future generations. And this legislation takes an important step forward. It doesn't go as far as it should, but it is a major step forward in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, I know we will be hearing from my Republican colleagues who are very upset that this will be a partisan bill, which it will be. But let me remind them that they used the so-called reconciliation process recently, two areas. Number one, they thought it important to go forward in a partisan way without Democratic support, with the enormously important goal of giving massive tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. That's how they used the reconciliation process. Well, we've got a little different idea. We're going to use the reconciliation process and the 50 votes we have with the Vice President to protect the working families of this country, not the billionaire class. And the other effort that they made in terms of reconciliation was to try, and they came within one vote of doing it, the late John McCain. They would have thrown up to 30 million Americans off of health care by ending the Affordable Care Act. So they have used reconciliation, and we will use it, except we're going to use it to protect ordinary Americans, the children, the elderly, the sick, and the poor, rather than just the very wealthy or the pharmaceutical industry. So, Mr. President, we are now in the midst of a debate over the physical infrastructure, the bipartisan bill, very important. We need to rebuild our roads and bridges. But more important is the need to address the crises facing working families all over this country. And when we go forward and do that, when we protect our children and the elderly and the environment, we're going to create millions of good-paying jobs, put people to work, rebuilding this country in a way that is long, long overdue. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.